So, what's the minimum wage today? $7.25. Hasn't moved a penny. Guy who wrote about this is Dave Jamieson. He wrote about it in the Huffington Post. A very good article. I want to bring him in now. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Jake. Thanks for having me.
All right. Now, tell me about what went wrong here. Why, like, when President Obama introduced his massive bill to increase minimum wage, what happened?
Well, the introduction never came. I mean,
really? Huh?
No, it did not. This was a campaign pledge he made. It's still on the Obama-Biden transitional website that by 2011 they would raise the minimum wage from $7.25 to $9.50. That may not sound like a lot, but if you're making $7.25 an hour, that's a lot of money. That would be a 31% raise. It simply hasn't happened, and Obama, frankly, hasn't really talked about it. I had a hard time even finding him on the record somewhere discussing this, since he came into office. And even his labor secretary, Hilda Solis, a few months ago, when she was pressed on this, pretty much dodged the question. So it hasn't moved, and right now it's hard to see when it is going to move.
So, Dave, a lot of times, obviously you can tell we're not big fans of the Republicans in terms of their tax plans, et cetera, right? But when you come to the Democrats, and I criticize President Obama on something like this or otherwise, the response is usually, well, what could he do? Congress won't let him do it. But the problem here is he didn't even try, did he? I mean, am I missing it?
No, as far as I could tell, he didn't. And to be fair, this increase right now would never get through the Republican-controlled House. But at the same time, there's a very good argument to be made for why it should be raised. A lot of economists, they compare raising the minimum wage to unemployment insurance, spending like that, where these are people, if you're making $7.25 and suddenly you're getting a couple more bucks an hour, $7.25, that only translates into a salary of around 10, 11, 12 grand after taxes. So if you're going to get a couple more grand, you're absolutely going to spend that money. And that's money that could be pumped into local economies now if people at the very bottom of the ladder had that money to spend.
So, look, here's the thing. You make a really compelling case for why the minimum wage would help the economy, not only the people that get the money directly, right, but also has the side benefits that it pumps money into the economy and more people get employed, et cetera. It's something that President Obama promised. And by the way, you said he can't get it through Congress now. I totally agree with that. But at the same time, I remember when they had 60 Democratic senators. And for 2 years, not that they had 60 the whole 2 years, but for 2 years when they had overwhelming majorities, they didn't even propose it. So that leads to the obvious question, Dave. Why not? Why isn't a so-called progressive president who's a Democrat not proposing something that would help the economy and was a campaign promise?
Right. What I've heard on background is that, there may have been concerns about doing this during a downturn. Republicans, when you bring this up, well, first of all, when you get outside of the Beltway, the idea of raising the minimum wage is very popular on both sides. And that's because, by definition, we're talking about working people. But once you get into the Beltway, this is very much a party line issue. And for a lot of Republicans, it's simply a job killer.
Yeah, but that's just not true. So, but that's the thing, Dave. See, that's the critical part, right? And I get it. That's part of the reason we just showed those stats. The average senator's net worth is over $2.5 million. He doesn't know anybody making minimum wage. He's in his little bubble. Everybody's a millionaire. Minimum wage? No. Now, all my friends who have run giant companies say I shouldn't do that, right? But that's why we elected a progressive president. My point there, Dave, is that I'm afraid that President Obama believes that Republican talking point. That Tim Geithner goes to him and says, oh, no, don't raise the minimum wage. That would hurt jobs. Even though that's not true, I'm afraid that President Obama goes, oh, yeah, I don't want to hurt the economy. That's why I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, that very well may be the case. And, the amazing thing, a lot of people you ask, people on the street, they may not realize that the minimum wage is as low as it is. $7.25 an hour now. It is at pretty much a historic low when adjusted for inflation. If it had kept pace with where it had been in the late 60s in 1968, it would be over $10 now. And, that would make, the idea of that right now would make Republicans and the chamber apoplectic. They just, so many of these business groups are going to fight. Literally, we're talking nickels and dimes here.
Yeah, and by the way, that's when conservatives say was the golden era of this country. is when we had, adjusted for inflation, $10 an hour for minimum wage. Of course, they forget why it was the golden era. All right, Dave Jamieson, great article, and we really appreciate you joining us to talk about it today. And, you know, and before we go to the